Hello, fellow chiropractors. My name is Dr. Bill Kriva. I am a 28-year veteran of the chiropractic profession, and I am a member of the AMC team as well. And we're here to talk a little bit about history and how important understanding our history is to being a chiropractor, and more importantly, how important it is to share that history with the newer docs that are coming into our profession, that are coming out of school, who don't have that background. Sitting here today with me is Dr. John Lay, a great friend of mine. We've been friends for many, many years. And we had a conversation at dinner here a couple of months ago about this very subject. And so I thought it would be interesting to continue that conversation in this podcast here today. John, would you like to say anything by way of introduction?
No, I mean, really, I've been practicing, been a chiropractor for 25 years now, so I'm younger than you.
Yeah, keep rubbing it in.
But yeah, unfortunately, we've known each other for about 20 years now. So, and I think you're right. With the history of everything, it's not just in our profession, which we're going to focus on today, but in any profession, you need to know the history. You need to know where you've come from. So yeah, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, and what prompted this conversation was actually teaching about chiropractic history at one of our AMC meetings, and it was amazing to me how little understanding there was of where we've come from, and it was also astonishing how powerful our history is as a chiropractic profession in terms of how we're defined today, how we got to where we are today. And I remember talking a little bit about when DD had the first chiropractic adjustment. The world, from a healthcare standpoint at that time, was radically different from what we have here today. There were all kinds of competing ideas with respect to healthcare, including naturopathy and osteopathy, and there was allopathy, the Western medicine. Chiropractic didn't really exist. There was magnetic healing that was being done, and all of this was acceptable. All of it was essentially equivalent, and yet coming out of there, we now have a system that's very medically based, that is traditionally Western medicine based, but we still have a chiropractic profession present as well. And how we managed to come through that time and survive and bring a very different view of healing into the world is an amazing story, and we owe a lot to our forefathers that started this. So,
yeah, I mean, osteopathy, the osteopaths, it is not the same profession. They're not the same now as they were back then either. They kind of bought into the medical model and got sucked into that, and now they're just kind of, a nurse practitioner or something like that, for the most part, I think.
Mm-hmm. And, going back to those early days, the early 1900s, when DD and BJ were trying to get chiropractic started, I didn't even realize this until I started doing some research, but the American Medical Association was well organized by the 1870s, and they already had a plan in place to take over medical education in this country. They were gaining control over the schools. They were closing down schools that did not agree with them. They started the very first state-sponsored school for teaching medicine, Johns Hopkins University, which is interesting to me. And they were already in the process of forming a monopoly on healthcare, trying to wipe out all of the other professions. And in the middle of that, we've got DD and we've got BJ, who were extremely strong personalities, who knew what they were about, who were willing to stand up to that system and be a light for chiropractic and promote chiropractic.
Well, if you remember, I know you remember the story, but Dr. Mayo's wife had a knee problem and could not get any help for it. They traveled to Europe. They saw the best medical doctors they could. Finally, they end up in Davenport to see BJ. And BJ takes an x-ray of her low back while Dr. Mayo's arguing with him the whole time. And I forget, BJ's got his way with words and stuff like that, and I forget exactly what it was he said, but basically he said, look, we got two strong personalities here. You came to see me. We're going to do this my way. Everybody else has looked at her knee, and it's still not working. Let's do this. And and she got so much help from him that Mayo Clinic started referring a bunch of people to BJ until the AMA stepped in and essentially forced Dr. Mayo to quit sending anybody to him, at least outwardly.
Yeah, and the AMA was definitely on the attack mode right from the very beginning. Yeah. In the early days, and I'm going to go two different directions with this, it was fascinating. BJ did not want to have doctors of chiropractic licensed because he didn't want to have any government control over the chiropractic profession, any other entity being able to tell chiropractors what to do. But what the AMA had done is establish licensing requirements nationwide for the medical doctors. And then they started prosecuting chiropractors at that time for practicing medicine without a license. And so, again, aggressive attack mode. And BJ, is going, well, we need to be able to stand up to this and stand on our own 2 feet. And so while we've got docs sitting in jail for the right to practice chiropractic, BJ said, we've got to go do some licensure, and started working on that.
Yeah, it was, of course, everything, and part of the history too, and this is, I'm sure that you cover this, but all this leads up until we get into the 70s, when they start coming out with the, what did they call that? The packet where they were, chiropractors ended up suing the AMA over this.
Oh yeah, the Wilkes suit.
Yes, thank you. And they started coming out with that stuff, right? And all that. And so they've been after us for a long time. It's a wonder like you said earlier, it's a wonder we've lasted this long. But if people start to forget that, and they start to lose the philosophy of what we really are, I don't know if we'll last another 100 years.
Yeah, the philosophy is a whole nother topic that we may want to run with on one of these podcasts. But agree with you with respect to they've always been after us. But coming back to the earlier days, somebody asked BJ, the press asked BJ at one point, to what do you attribute the success of the chiropractic profession? He said, results. One word, results. And in studying this battle for licensure, something fascinating came to light, and that is the role of chiropractic during the 1917 flu epidemic.
I was just thinking about that.
We just went through COVID, and I'll be honest with you, I personally got into some trouble because I was actually telling the stories in videos on my website, things like that, of what happened during 1917. And the role that chiropractic played during that pandemic. And they were telling me, well, you can't say that. But in fact, yes, I was being censored. I needed to say that. Mm-hmm. We have to learn from our history in order to be able to figure out how to navigate where we are today.
Yeah, wasn't it? And I'm sure you know the numbers probably, but the people that saw chiropractors during that pandemic, the ones who were actually sent to chiropractors by the medical profession were the ones that they had given up for dead, and they had a better success rate with the ones given up for dead than the medical profession was having with the healthy Spanish flu.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. They took the worst of the worst, the ones that they said there's nothing else we can do for them, and the chiropractors got them well.
Yeah.
And the thing, and this is what really frosted me during COVID, is this is all government data.
Yeah.
The governments collected the data, the number of illnesses, the number of cases, the number of deaths. They had all of this in their official records and archives. You can't argue with the numbers, their official statistics. Mm-hmm. And they showed that chiropractors were tremendously more effective in helping people with the Spanish flu in 1917 than the medical doctors. The death rates for chiropractors were like 1/10 of what the medical doctors were experiencing. And the reason that's relevant is we were just talking about the licensing efforts that chiropractic was going through. There was a lot of back pressure from the AMA. They were lobbying, and they had very strong lobbying presence in the state legislatures, and chiropractors weren't getting licensed. They weren't able to get the legislation passed. And after 1917, all of this information on the effectiveness of chiropractic came out, and bang, one right after another, states started passing chiropractic licensure laws, and including my home state of Minnesota. They passed that law right after that flu epidemic, where it had been vetoed by the governor before the flu epidemic. So long story short, if we don't understand our history, we don't know how to navigate where we are today.
No, you think back then too, and this in the Spanish flu, but the Windsor autopsies, that was published in medical journals back then, showing the connection between diseased organs in cats and human cadavers, with spinal misalignments in those, and but they don't talk about that anymore.
No, they don't. And that's also interesting to me. I was just talking about this yesterday, teaching in a class. The medical community at that time, back historically, gave chiropractors a bunch of grief about upper cervical adjustments, because they said there's no way the brainstem extends down past C1 or down close to C1. And they were basing their commentary on cadaver studies where the cadaver's laying horizontal and no longer alive. And they had no clue, and they couldn't image it. So they were saying, this is what we're finding when we open these cadavers up. Yeah. Well, today we have the ability to see that on MRI, and we have the ability to definitely demonstrate that the brainstem does extend that far, and chiropractic can have an impact on that.
Absolutely. Why don't you did a class on this a couple of months ago. What are some of the other historical chiropractic data that you have?
A tremendous opportunity, and I would like to throw this out to the doctors that are listening to us right now on this podcast. A lot of people do not know that B.J. Palmer in Davenport had a mental hospital that was called the Clearview Sanitarium. And it was in operation for many years, and it was used to treat mental conditions, mental health problems, chiropractically. And it was fascinating because they were using things like proper diet, chiropractic adjustments, exercise, fresh air. All this stuff is how they were treating the patients. And at the time, they were getting tremendous results.
Cutting edge technology, it sounds like.
You got it. Cutting edge. We found our way back to what they knew back in the day. Yeah. But we as chiropractors no longer actually have a claim on that mental health aspect at this point. And what broke that was the introduction of a lot of the medications that psychiatrists are now using for dealing with psychiatric problems. And with the onset of medications, they successfully took patients away from the chiropractors. But BJ had a Clearview Sanitarium. There was other chiropractic psychiatric hospitals around the country that were in operation. And the Sears Clinic, the Sears Chiropractic Hospital in Colorado, was started as a psychiatric hospital. It was the largest chiropractic hospital in the world. We've lost that. We need to regain that when we look back on our history.
Yeah, and I told you this a couple of months ago, you know so much more about this history stuff than I do. I don't know if you picked it up at Palmer, probably picked most of it up studying about it later. I went to Life. We got a lot of philosophy there with Dr. Sid, but I didn't get a whole lot of history there. I didn't know a ton about BJ or DD or things like that.
Yeah, and I think that it was driven by two things. Number one, I went to Palmer and Davenport, and a lot of these events that we talk about in the early days of chiropractic took place right there. Okay, BJ's house is right there. The original location of the school is right there. So you're in the middle of the historical setting where a lot of these events took place that were monumental in the chiropractic profession. And you can feel it. You can feel the history there.
Yeah. Well, you also have, I assume the elevator shaft was open when you were there, right? where they found all his research studies and files and things like that? Is that what they found
No,
in there?
and that's another great point. And I talked about this in the class that I taught about chiropractic history. There was a rumor when I was at school in Davenport that there was an old elevator shaft that they had closed up, and that they had put a bunch of BJ's old records and files, including records from the Clearview Sanitarium, in the elevator shaft. And they had closed the thing up, and we didn't have any evidence that that was real. It was just rumors. Okay. And I was back to Palmer this last fall, and they did a remodel on the building that old elevator shaft was in. And yes, they, in fact, when they opened the wall, found the shaft, and they found all this material. Some of it was destroyed because it was waterlogged. But here's a really cool thing. They put a glass front on the elevator door on that shaft. They're using it again as an elevator. And when the elevator's not on that floor, you can look through the glass door and see the epigrams that BJ had written on the inside of the elevator shaft back in the day. He covered the school. Most chiropractors probably have heard of epigrams and know about it, but literally these are the original epigrams that BJ put in the old elevator shaft, because those elevators were open cages and you could see the walls as you were going by, so you could read the epigrams. It was hysterical.
That's funny. We had them all over life on wooden plaques, and I assume Dr. Williams had taken them from BJ and then put them on these little wooden plaques, and they were all over life. So he tried to carry that from Davenport down to Atlanta for sure. Never been to another school, so I don't know if they have them there. But
yeah, I don't know if they do either. I know I've not seen them at Northwestern, which is in where I'm living in Minnesota at this point. But they're still there. It's amazing to see. They are the original ones. They would have not been repainted or anything like that. They were in the shaft.
That's cool. I'd like to see some of that research stuff too.
Yeah, and I'd like to get my hands on that. I don't know who actually has that at this point. I know they've got it, and I'm sure they've got it in the archives at Palmer someplace. But again, hidden in that information is historical insight into what was being done in our profession in those days. And there are messages there, information there that we can bring to today and perhaps apply to what we do as chiropractors in our current practices, if we could just dig it out.
You got to remember who you are, right? We got a lot of kids coming out of school these days, graduating, essentially being taught that they're pain management. And they're really learning in school how to refer out, not how to see somebody. And that is not what this profession was ever supposed to be about. And you brought up, Rona back in 2020, the offices that we worked with that thrived and actually grew through that are the offices that knew who they were. They were strong philosophically and knew why they had become chiropractors, and knew that they were a healthcare professional and they were the best option to keep these people well as they're going through there. Those offices did great. The offices that, thought they were here to fix a crick in the neck or get rid of a headache, they struggled.
Yeah. And 100% agree with that. And with our office during that whole period of time, that was the inspiration and the fire that we actually grew our practice during COVID. And the reason was I was inspired by my knowledge and understanding of what had taken place in 1917. And I knew what chiropractic had done at that time with the flu epidemic. And I saw very similar circumstances repeating themselves, obviously during the COVID. And long story short, we stayed open and we were telling the story about what chiropractic can do with confidence, because it had been done before, and people were responding to that, and they were coming in droves to get a natural approach to trying to stay healthy, and that was a value to folks at that point.
Yeah, and it was probably the same in Minnesota, but there was a doc I worked with who's in Texas, and the Texas State Board was telling chiropractors down there, you can't tell them that you can help their immune system with this. And of course, this doc was like, I'm going to tell them anyway.
Right.
But, that's kind of the weak leadership that we have infiltrating some of this stuff because of what they're not learning in the schools nowadays. What do you think, Dr. Kriva, with the history and stuff that you've studied, what why do you think it's important that chiropractors learn that, know that, and how can it help them in their practice?
Really great. First of all, we need to understand what we can do. A little aside, when I was going through chiropractic school, I studied the Gonstead technique. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Mount Horeb, to the Gonstead Clinic, to actually take their classes and learn at the Gonstead Clinic in Mount Horeb about chiropractic. And interestingly enough, going to Palmer, I was taught, just like you're talking about, how to refer as opposed to what chiropractic actually can do. At the Gonstead Clinic, I saw cases of visceral conditions that were resolved. I saw impossible cases that the medical doctors couldn't help that were resolved. I saw cases I was taught in school that needed to be referred out where they got tremendous results with chiropractic care. And I learned there more about chiropractic and what chiropractic can do than I learned going to Palmer Davenport, which is, the Fountainhead. Why? Because they were tapped into the historical roots of how chiropractic was taught, how chiropractic was practiced, and they knew what chiropractic could do. And those stories were still alive there. They hadn't been lost into the dustbin of history. They knew what had happened historically, and they knew what chiropractic could do. And I think that's a key message as we go forward. We as chiropractors need to understand what we can do, what chiropractic is capable of, and tell people about it. They're not going to hear about this on the drug commercials on TV. We have to be able to speak intelligently about it, but a lot of docs can't because they've never studied the history. Yeah. And that's my encouragement. You also asked, why did I have an interest in history? When I was at Palmer, I actually did a series of articles for the school newspaper on the history of chiropractic because I was fascinated by it. Okay, I've always been fascinated. Why? Because I wanted to understand how we got to where I was when we were at Palmer back when I was in school. Okay, what preceded us? What shaped us? I encourage those who are listening now, study your chiropractic history. Go back and look at the names that have come before us. Look at what those doctors did and what they endured. The AMA never went away. You just hit it again with the Wilkes lawsuit. The entire history of chiropractic is marked by conflict with the AMA, with them trying to wipe us out. And the only reason we're still here is because we had some really, really strong chiropractors with strong foundations, strong historical understanding, strong philosophical underpinnings that allowed them to survive that onslaught.
Yeah, and they were brave enough to get out and speak their case, speak their mind, and fight. And I think that's one of the biggest keys is even if you know the chiropractic philosophy, but you don't talk about it in your office, you're doing a disservice to your public and to your practice, because if we don't tell anybody, who is? An example I thought of while you were talking there, and it's about just knowing history. Nowadays you've got people who don't really know NBA history, who think this idiot LeBron James is the best basketball player that's ever lived, when everybody knows that it's Michael Jordan that goes back. So it's the same thing. If all you know is from the time you were born to now, you're losing a lot of knowledge in there.
Amen. And there's another aspect of chiropractic history that I shared in the class that is fascinating to me. And a lot of people don't know this within the profession. They know BJ was the developer. That's it. A lot of people don't know that BJ actually was an expert in radio broadcasting and in marketing over the airwaves, marketing through the radio. BJ had a radio station in Davenport, Iowa that was parked right across the street from the school, WOC radio. And World of Chiropractic is how it became known. And he had another radio station in Des Moines, Iowa called WHO, with hands only is where that name came from. And long story short, he used those platforms to broadcast the news about chiropractic, to promote chiropractic, to get it out into the masses. He would tell stories. He would tell travel logs. He talked about chiropractic. He promoted chiropractic. That was the whole purpose for getting into the radio in the first place. Mm-hmm. we've lost an element of that as well at this point in terms of our ability to go out and share that information, tell people about chiropractic. BJ was way ahead of the curve historically when he was doing that.
Yeah. And this is a squirrel moment for me, but I seem to think that, didn't we have a former president who was actually on one of those radio stations?
It's not a squirrel moment. It's right on. Ronald Reagan actually worked for B.J. Palmer at WOC Radio in Davenport, Iowa. And the story, we're going to go there. We're having a little history trivia. Is Reagan did live broadcasts of baseball games. But he wasn't actually at the baseball game. He had a ticker tape that was giving the play-by-play of what was going on. Then he would read the ticker tape and then pretend he was at the game and go through the play-by-play on the air. And that's how he got started with his acting career, working for B.J. Palmer in Davenport, Iowa at B.J.'s radio station.
Your first ever broadcast delay there.
Yes, that's it. So it's true. But again, think about this, okay, coming back to the point of the greats that have gone before us. Think about the impact that he had. Those radio stations had nationwide reach at night. They were extremely powerful. They could cover the entire country. Think about people like B.J. Palmer. Think about Sid Williams and what he did with Life. And think about Dr. Owen, who's the founder of AMC. These folks that went before us that were tremendous chiropractors, rooted in their understanding of what we can do as chiropractors, what the possibilities are, and the impact on the millions of lives that they've had. We have a responsibility today as we go forward to understand our roots, to put our feet down into those roots so we've got a solid underpinning, and then be able to take what we've learned historically and broadcast it into the future. That's the whole point. And that's my encouragement to the young chiropractors. Learn this stuff. Go back and understand the roots of what you're doing and why, and then be able to share that with other chiropractors going forward.
And then hopefully we'll have our own Joe Rogan to get developed.
That would be awesome.
and get, because I think podcasts or something else that's going to come up in the future has replaced radio. But if we could get somebody to start getting a large enough following where we can continue the message out to everybody.
I would love to see it. Love to see it. In the meantime, each and every one of us as chiropractors have an obligation to share the message where we are to the best of our ability, and not forget our history, and actually continue walking in the footsteps of the greats that have come before us. Any other thoughts that you have today?
I think that's it for me, Doc. I appreciate it.
Dr. Lay, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a joy. It's always fun talking with you about this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I hope that you've gotten some interesting insights from this podcast here this time around. And we'll look forward to spending some more time with you again in the future. For now, I'm Dr. Bill Kriva, and hope you guys are blessed in your practice. Go out and touch some lives.